Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining today's Irregular Warfare Initiative virtual engagement. My name is Olga Chiriac, and together with Lieutenant Colonel Michael Fazio, we will be your hosts and moderators for a timely discussion on irregular warfare in the post-Soviet space. In focus today, the Republic of Moldova. So before I introduce the panel, allow me to introduce Project Europe. This is very exciting for us because this is our first public engagement other than our articles. As you all know, the Irregular Warfare Initiative has a core mission, and the core mission always was and continues to be to bridge the gap between scholars and practitioners and to support the irregular warfare enterprise. To do this, we generate original content for the irregular warfare community, to include the IWI podcasts, original written articles by members of the irregular warfare community, such as yourself, an email newsletter for which I invite you to subscribe in case you have not done so already, and of course, our very prestigious Fellows Program. It is in this wider framework that Project Europe set out to explore, analyze, and better understand the way in which our European allies and partners conduct and defend against irregular warfare, both historically and at present. In spite of a marked regional focus, our project is looking to explore themes such as, and of course this is included but not limited to, the role of irregular warfare in the context of strategic competition in Europe, IW in the post-Soviet space and the Western Balkans, the impact of AI and emerging technologies in IW across domains in different European and European adjacent theaters, from the Arctic to the Black Sea, human security and democratic resilience, socioeconomic warfare and influence operations, both in the human and the cyber domain, post-conflict reconstruction and peace-building operations, terrorism and counterterrorism. So please join us in this very important conversation by submitting your work on the Project Europe IWI website and by following us on X, formerly known as Twitter. Same goes for all of our other projects as well as our core team. Our panel and disclosure, obviously the views expressed today do not include those of the Modern War Institute, Princeton University, the United States federal government, or any other government. Our panelists today are Mr. Vladislav Cojuhari, Deputy General Secretary of the Ministry of the Interior of the Republic of Moldova. He is a dedicated public servant with a strong commitment to enhancing the security and well-being of the Republic of Moldova, with a background in law enforcement and a deep understanding of the current security challenges the country is facing. Mr. Cojuhari has been instrumental in driving reforms and fostering international cooperation and co-leads the European Union's security hub. As Deputy General, Mr. Cojuhari works on efforts to ensure the safety and resilience of the nation while promoting transparency and good governance. Our other speaker is Mr. Wili Apreutesei, the European Union High-Level Advisor on Security Internal Affairs. A law enforcement veteran with over 21 years of experience. Former roles include criminal investigation officer, analyst, and manager of information analysis, as well as first deputy of the General Inspector of the Romanian Police. Our third speaker, Dr. Jeffrey Mankoff, is a distinguished research fellow at the United States National Defense University's Institute for National Strategic Studies, and a non-resident senior associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. His research focuses on Russian foreign policy, Eurasian geopolitics, and the role of history and memory in international relations. He is the author of the books Empires of Eurasia, How Imperial Legacies Shape International Security, and Russian Foreign Policy, The Return of Great Power Politics. Full disclosure, Dr. Mankoff, Jeff, is traveling, so he might be a little bit delayed in joining our panel, or hopefully he will make it. With that said, Michael, the floor is yours.
No, thank you, Olga. And we are very excited to have all our hosts, or all our panelists here today, to have this very important discussion. And like Olga said, we aim to bring together scholars, policymakers, and practitioners to share knowledge, and that's in order to help prepare, defend, and build resiliency against irregular and hybrid threats. And that's where our conversation is going to lie today. With that in mind, we're going to guide our discussion with really the following questions in mind to help make that bridge. We want to talk first about the historical drivers of Russian behavior and why it is interfering in Moldova, what that Russian interference in Moldova can reveal about the Russia's way of irregular warfare, and what Moldova has done to deter, blunt, or defend against those Russian irregular threats that they face. And frankly, like, the thing that we're all going after is, what can the rest of us learn from this experience that Moldova has had, and how can we better defend ourselves against those threats? From there, I really want to turn it over to our panelists. Make no more no more mixing words, and go right over to Vlad first for your comments, sir.
Thanks, sir. Greetings to everyone, and I really appreciate the possibility and your time in order to talk about this very important topic. So, starting with the March 2022, actually, but more or less we can talk about the hybrid warfare here from the 1991 actually, and by saying this, we have quite a big experience in this field, more than 30 years. But from starting with the March 2022, Moldova becomes to be in center actually of most aggressive hybrid warfare ever known. At this point, member states and international organizations have had to redefine both their own concepts of security and the ways of cooperation in the face of current hybrid threats, which already exceeds military domain. Because why I'm mentioning this moment, classically known hybrid was and maybe a military objective, but gained with unconventional instruments. So today, this already exceeds this domain, and the main goal today in this hybrid warfare is to destabilize the social circles, social communities that are in Moldova. By saying this, it is important to mention that being one of the smallest countries in Europe, we have the biggest number of communities, because if you want to be understood here in Moldova in any centimeter square part of the field, you should know at least 6 languages. So, and I'm not talking about English. You should know Romanian, you should know Turkey, Ukrainian, Russian, Bulgarian, Roman. So, by saying this, you understand how first target of any hybrid warfare is identified. Because hybrid warfare, why it is so dangerous? Because it aims to different, let's say, silos. And we are really good. Everyone is really good. Every country, every government is really good in his silo. So when you talk about one community, when you talk about domain, when you talk about one field, but what happens when a threat is touching a few of them? So already you start to face first point, it's ambiguity, because you don't understand who is attacking what, who is leading what, And without leadership, without sharp, prompt activities, this threat began boiling, a boiling activity, and it makes, like every boiling process, it create pressure, and it is done. It is quite not dangerous from first point, and it may be understood as any type of discussions, or I don't know what, simulations. But if it would be let going like this, it will create serious problems. And for instance, one of the most so not most, but first methods used in 2022 was the phenomena of fake bomb alerts. So we had for 1 year approximately a few thousands. So it's number of thousands of fake bomb alerts, and 362 days. It's quite a big number. And the idea was to destabilize the society by putting pressure on this field of law enforcement. So it was the idea to create an aggressive approach of the community to law enforcement, because you have a false bomb alert in the airport, people bought tickets, everyone came with 2-3 hours before to make check-in, and you have here guys and ladies in police uniform who are explaining you, please stop, get out from here, because it's, and people, you have more jokes to do. And it was like a simple phenomenon, and if I will stop here, a lot of people will say yes, real troubles. But the idea was not here. The idea was that the next step was public riots. And when you have public protests, and in our situation, the majority of them were instrumentalized. Your idea is not to protest peacefully, but your idea is to overthrow some governmental entities. And to keep it short, the idea of the adversary here in this hybrid warfare from 2022 was to overthrow the government. The idea was to overthrow the constitutional elected forces. And it was done piece by piece. You have some small fake bomb alerts. You have some attacks on cyber attacks on different schools, universities, hospitals. You have some situations of blackmails. You have these DDoS attacks on different banks, border police institution, and you stop actually the borders, and it's quite difficult to proceed to verify all citizens. And this creates traffic jams, people are angered, and s'il vous plaît, you have public protests. So would you protest peacefully, or do you want to be once again to be treated as an animal, getting you out from airport and so on? And it creates pressure, and here you have using, we've identified using of different layers of attributes. So you have objectives and you have attributes. For instance, you have 6 communities. So what you would do? You would attack the language. So you say, okay, guys, we heard that they want to forbid the Russian language, or to forbid Ukrainian language, or to make you talk everyone on Romanian language, which is not a language. Moldovan, this is a true language, and debates for very low intellectual debates, but they gain some public, they gain some attention, and this debates create some premises to be further treated as maybe some victimization, Because if you say that we would like to talk on some, I don't know what language that does not exist, and you will say, please let's move to another issue, and say, and you will say, you try to limit my right for expression and so on, and not to forget our technical revolution. So we have plenty of possibilities to fake. We have a lot of possibilities to access the fake information. So I mean, not the problem of technical revolution and so on. So, but the problem is that we are daily reading, all of us, we are reading daily a lot of fake information. And when you read a lot of fake information, sometimes, and some after a while, maybe you'll start to think about maybe it's real, and the possibilities here are different. For instance, in Moldova, it's very popular such social application as Telegram channel, and there you have bots, and you can create 10 or 20 different channels. It's like media channel, making an impression of 20 or 40 or 50 or 100 different people, but all of them are managed by one person. And the interesting law is that most crazy, most stupid informations, they gain the biggest amount of public. So you work on some different stories there, you create your community, and after this you start to moderate it, let's say like this. So we start to face also here problem about the impossibility of the quite difficult possibility to identification of the person who are writing their fake news, fake informations, which are actually, once again, fueling some sort of general objective. And here, in conclusion, I would like to say that the most important thing what we learned here in this hybrid warfare, because it will never end, you stop Telegram, it will open on WhatsApp, you stop the WhatsApp or Signal or Facebook or so on. It doesn't matter the application. So the problem is not in application, and the problem is not in computer. So the biggest issue in every hybrid warfare is to identify the main objective. Because if you look at fake news as just fake news, it will be a never-ending war. But if you will look at it from the general perspective as general objective, to overthrow the government, so you should think about instruments. And here what we've done when we faced with the biggest problem is this attacking multi-dimensional attack of the hybrid warfare, we start to think what we can do, what we can manage, and with the support of European Union, we created this European Union Security Hub, which is actually the first step to destroy those silos. Because on this hub we have the delegations from Customs, National Financial Investigation Unit, National Security Agency, General Prosecutor Office, and Ministry of Interior with all of their entities. I mean, border police, carabinieri, IT guys. And more of this, we welcomed aboard in this year. Also on board, we welcomed Ministry of Defense and Close Protection. And by having this, all these entities on board, we meet each other, and we needed actually some time to train each other in order to think about general objectives. So it was quite difficult because anyway, you were thinking about your entity. So what will Ministry of Interior gain? What will Ministry of Defense or National Security Agency? Why should I come? Why should I use my time? So what my entity will gain? And we were facing this challenge. Thankfully, we changed it, and now we are thinking more in objective. So if it is national objective, it doesn't really matter who will do the utmost work. So maybe Ministry of Interior will do 80%, Ministry of Defense 10, NSA 5, and 5 will do, the last 5 will do customs. So customs will solve the issue. And it's okay for us. It is great. Because previously the big conflict will start and everybody will start to discuss who did more and who did what and who is the champion and who is not. So this was egocentric. This point of leadership was quite difficult to drive. And now when we start to move in this revolution by trying to destroy those silos, when we see any hybrid attack, we start to think about the last or let's say general objective, what it tries to do, because we had a lot of different letters made fake from different authorities, from the name of fake president or fake minister of interior or fake prime minister, and the idea was why. So we were searching, and the only one answer was just to reduce from authority and the responsibility of high-level leaders, executive, and this would further lead to destabilize the situation in Moldova. And it is quite logical, because when you have a physical contact, so you have physical war in Ukraine. Now, what is the easiest way to gain this territory? And it is cheaper and it is easy to create chaos. If you destabilize the situation, it will be chaos here. It's very easy to control this territory. So in this given context, we are part of this EU security hub. So it's more about Moldova. It's not as much for Moldova, but it's about Moldova. It is more for the European Union territory. So it is our input in this European Union integration, because we are committed willingly to be part of EU family, and obviously you should contribute. You should put your input in there. Who with the financial, who logistical, so everyone, other resources. So we are committed to produce, to input by our security products. So we are not willing to transfer or to see some risks for EU and just to stay and look at this. No, we will fight it. And in this appropriate intervention mechanism, when we talk about the instrumentalization of different threats and everything that might endanger security of Moldova, obviously will endanger the security of the EU. So by saying this, we are witnessing actually the increasingly use of advanced technology. We this year already in 2023 we saw new types of illegal financing mechanism when you have different MasterCard bank cards, MasterCard credit cards with the exact amount of money, and on card is written the name of the political party in order to to take your vote on election. And some of these technologies, they are actually game changers on the battlefield, and this is why we should think about redesigning the security paradigm, because normally when you are talking in classical terms, security, 99% of people will think about national security agencies, about intelligence agencies. So when you speak about the insurance, the security of citizens, then you should use law enforcement, yes? But today already it is not, because the operating mode today of the internal affairs system represents a combination of security, defense, intelligence, and technology. So these pillars, these areas of analysis, action, and intervention must be considered, as the hybrid warfare involves all possible types and all possible resources and methods. So any consequences, even the last month, the situation with the rockets, rockets that fell on our territory. So the consequences, they are also facing the internal affairs, so the security of citizens. And now this is why now we should gain the hearts and souls, first of all, of our security intelligence entities, in order to be ready to share with their information with us, and not just raw data, but actionable data. Even today, we launched this exercise of joint action days here in Moldova, and at this exercise took part all those entities that we mentioned. So we are not talking about Ministry of Interior. We are not talking about other ministries. So we are talking about the national objective to already to serve and protect as national objective, not just a law enforcement institution. And our logic is to think fast, action very sharp. And if we will guarantee the security of Moldovan region, obviously this will be harder to destabilize the security at the European Union region. Now the cooperation also with Europol on all there, because the security hub actually is working on the same 9 objectives on which Europol is focused, and by using also the same channels of communication, the same protocols, we are overcoming already some of the communication issues. The main idea anyway is to collect, evaluate the information, evaluate the data, integrate this in internal frame, internal picture, which we know the best. After this, you make some conclusions, some hypotheses, some basic conclusions, general conclusions, and these general conclusions on which anyone on which some of the actors can obviously start to action, you should share. Not just share 24 or 225, or we have 300 or 400. It really doesn't make any sense to anyone, those numbers. What does make sense, it is where it was going, why it was moving here, why today, why not yesterday, what was searching for the people, why they were only Moldavans or other parts, all other types of citizens, and such types of questions must have replies, must have answers, and based on answers, we must identify the general objective. And now you pick up the phone and you call your comrade and say, okay, listen, we have an issue, or okay, you should be prepared for maybe they're already near, or maybe they're already acting there. So this is the idea, and the biggest problems they will come obviously when we will try to be more autonomous in energetical sector, because it was somehow made from Soviet. It was also made with pre-planned, yeah, with pre-planned activities during even Soviet Union. All our energetical resources, they were linked to another territory, or they were made in such type that might be disconnected in every minute. So nothing was done. Okay, guys, please have everything for free or very, very cheap. No, it was really cheap, but if you will start to do something you should not, you'll be very fast disconnected. And we are ready, prepared to embrace even harder and bigger hybrid warfare when we will start to generate ideas in order to overcome that energetical crisis with which we are faced already from 2022. This being said, once again, I welcome such types of events. I thank you very much from all my soul for the possibility to talk here today. And if there are any questions, if not, I will give the floor to my colleague, Wili Apreutesei, who is a great expert in this field of internal affairs and security.
No, thanks, Vlad. I really appreciate the highlight of the silos that you're trying to break down within Moldova, because the experiences you've had the past 30 years, I think, are a microcosm of things that we will continue to see out of Russia and the ways that they are evolving their different kinds of hybrid attacks and irregular warfare, waging it against other countries as well. So I really appreciate those insights. We will get to questions after everybody gets a chance to speak. So we're going to pass it over to Wili. I want to hear your perspective as well, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, Vlad has mentioned a lot, and we've been working together for like maybe 12 years or so. Before I got this post as a EU high-level advisor here in Moldova on the 7th of February 2022. So I had no idea I signed up for a war at the border, which broke up a few weeks later. Indeed, what Vlad mentioned, it's something that you experience while you are here, because yeah, I've been a law enforcement officer for over 22 years, but even working in Romania, which is just bordering Moldova, you don't have this sense of connection to the east, because this is what is happening here in Moldova, and they have strong connections with Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, even before the war. I mean, you are all aware of the fact that there are networks of law enforcement officers. Vlad mentioned Europol, there's Interpol, and all the other stuff. But me, in my 22 years of experience, I never went to fora that were having representatives from the East. But this is happening here in Moldova. And why this is relevant? This is relevant because actually Moldova now has become a security provider in terms of the capacity and the willingness to share data and actionable information. From the very first months of the war in Ukraine, in record time with the EU, we built an agreement with Frontex, and Frontex, which is a EU agency for border, they are here present on the ground. So actually, what is happening now, even though formally Moldova is not part of EU, actually the EU bodies are present in Moldova at the borders with Ukraine. So if you see it if you imagine like a security belt, Moldova is already in. Then of course Moldova is not in the EU yet, but probably 60% of Moldovans are, because Moldovans, due to their multi-ethnicity, they would have double nationality, whether it's Romanian, whether it's Bulgarian, whether it's Polish, Estonian, Lithuanian, you name it. So there are certain statistics which say that the person who has two nationalities here is over 60-70%. So this relates to the complexity of the issues. Now, Vlad also mentioned the fact that you have a lot of polarization, post-truth, and populism in all his examples. The examples could go on with every manual book of disinformation you or our viewers have ever laid their hands on. With starting from don't drink water in the beginning of the door because it's poisonous. Don't smell perfumes in the airport because you will die from intoxication. So don't go to work today because you will be then subject to being court-martialed because you will obey to a non-constitutional authority. So all these things that have happened, they don't need to be. When you think disinformation, and we are all educated people, you think that there's a huge construct around everything, that people elaborate messages. No, it's extremely simple. For example, you have EU member states opening or facilitating opening a kindergarten here or a school and everything with all visibility in place, and you will have documentaries about what other democracies do to help Moldova. And then at the end of the day, or in a few weeks later, you have another television from the East saying how everything was done by with the help of East authorities from the East. Or you would have personalities which are on a hot pursuit, so wanted criminals here in Moldova, just saying that if they are back in power, they would just pay for everyone gases, everyone pensions, because they have the money to do so. So we have to move away from considering that they are elaborate schemes. They are just simply it's like using AI tools when you are trying to evaluate sentiment. It's just three ways: it's positive, negative, or neutral. So they are aiming for the negative to transparent throughout everything in terms of social, economic, cultural, so all the aspects of the society. So so that they as Vlad mentioned, they keep this objective of sending out negativity. So you can imagine that even though the world went through a COVID crisis, the simplest message is that because there's this power in place, you have COVID. If there was another power in place, the COVID will be non-existent. Everybody has suffered from high energy prices and inflation throughout the whole world, but that's not because of the world is going through these times. It's just because you are not be friends with Russia, because that will be the key that will solve everything. So that's one thing we learned here. It's a constant messaging. It doesn't have to be elaborate. You don't have to do a lot of planning on that. You just fill the informational space. And as Vlad mentioned, it's a losing game if you are running after the effects. You have to go through the objectives. And this is what Moldova is doing now. And this is why Vlad mentioned the EU Security Hub, Frontex, Europol, NATO is here. And this is why, probably to deter all this, Moldova has chosen this path where it's open, visible, transparent, it's inclusive. You have, even in the ministry or in all law enforcement, you would have people, if you cross border between Romania and Moldova, you would have officers from Frontex alongside with officers from Moldova. If you're going into the analysis department, the guys who are doing risk assessments, you will also see professionals standing shoulder to shoulder. So it's not traditional sharing of knowledge or expertise, like you do a gap analysis, fact-finding missions, and you provide recommendations. But you do everything on a fly and sharing experiences on particular cases. So this is something that is that is really a key takeaway of how Moldova is handling these things here. So back to you, Mike.
No, thanks, Willie. I appreciate it. You really hit it nail on the head on how you're addressing some of these issues. I think we'll go into some questions. We had one on a broader European perspective as opposed to the Moldova experience on what are the sources of European disbelief or ignorance against some of these Russian hybrid threats, because Moldova has been dealing with this for 30 years. It's pretty acute, in your face, and I think the rest of Europe who might not have such a acute experience. What, in other words, what is the problem? Why they don't necessarily see this, especially prior to March 2022? What is the issue there? Is it a sensing problem, a decision-making problem, political courage to recognize some of these threats, or is it something else?
I can take that, Mike. The idea is that, as I mentioned in the beginning of my intervention, we in the EU, we were traditionally focused on the fact that there has to be some sort of gain. When you analyze, for example, criminal networks, you have these principles of following the money or follow the value. So it was something always tangible that would hurt the well-being and the life of citizens. But with hybrid threats, as Vlad mentioned, which are touching your beliefs, and they're creating this sort of behavioral change patterns. They were not on the agenda of EU, and I've been a member of different fora in Brussels since 2022, but it was very much criminal oriented. That was the policy. Even if you look at the European strategies on the Council, the Parliament, or the Commission security strategies, which, by the way, they will need to be soon redesigned, because they will expire in 2024 and 2025. So that will be an interesting discussion to have around these issues. But coming back, these hybrid threats, irregular warfare, this was something that was probably looked at from the perspective of radicalization. So you have a lot of anti-radicalization networks, practitioner groups on radicalization, but not necessarily on topics like this, polarization, post-truth, and populism, because they were perceived also like extreme left or extreme right. So not attacking the core beliefs of the state and attacking actually the democracies in itself. So it's not a choice whether you like that person or the other person, or this party or this party. In the end, it becomes a choice whether you would go for autocracy or democracy.
And also, we here today, talking about today's situation, which have roots in this data that Wili mentioned. So we have a very strong developed Russian media ecosystem, which is actually represents a strong network of from the political point of view, pro-Russian sympathizers, not from cultural. It talks about different moments, let's say, needed values regarding who is responsible for all the bad things that are happening here in the world, who is the bad guys, why Ukrainians start this war, and so on. And for us, we even heard we are already somehow trained for such types of news. But when you have 90% of information having so from all the 100% of the data space, informational space, 90% maybe 80 even. So 80, 90, it's a lot. It's not 30, it's not 40, it's not 50. And when you have this amount of 80%, 90%, when you come with with the true, which is actually just 5 or 10%, it's 5 or 10%. And actually, we like here very much this comparison that our president gave. It's very difficult to play with someone in chess who is boxing with you,
In chess.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, it's about also the numbers. When you have 50, 50, 40, 60, it's somehow. But when you have 90 and you have 10, it is really difficult. And unfortunately, you need time. You need a lot of time to prove that these 10% are true. But you don't have unfortunately at this time. And we had such examples even, for instance, in Georgia, when they started to gain their energetical autonomy, and they start to build this hydraulical electricity station. And when only they start this work with the support of Turkey organization, immediately appeared a group of, I don't know what, environmental protection group, which start to make violence, riots, mass disorders, and so on. So finally, that organization stopped the project, and when they start to investigate the situation into 1.5 years, so they identified the routes that were coming from Moscow. So there was no interest for Russian Federation for Georgia to gain autonomy in this energetical sector. So yes, this is when we talk about the numbers, and this is when we talk about this community, the diversity.
No, thanks. I think you're always almost fighting at a disadvantage when you're dealing with the sensationalization of this information and the very expedient explanations like your COVID or your energy price explanation of we can just blame who's in charge. That is a very wicked problem to try and defend against. I think Olga had a question.
And it actually connects to what you just mentioned about the historical legacy and sociocultural finesse aspects that I think that engagements like the one today can help us to communicate to Europeans and to the United States and to the further, not only IW community, but the international community about Moldova. There's a question from our participants, and that is particularly referring to Transnistria. Namely, has Transnistria been used as a vehicle for hybrid warfare against Moldova by the Russian Federation in order to hide its culpability?
No. Yep. Thank you for the question. So, if we will jump a little bit in history, so we will draw this analytical timeline, and we will make a point in the 1992. So before this, when in 1990s the discussion started for gaining the independence, so when Soviet Union started to separate different countries, independent countries, when Moldova raised this topic, let's say, of independence, Moldova was immediately informed that they will have territorial issues if they would like. So Moldova would like to gain the independence, and when then so everyone was quite amused to how, why, where. But we are coming once again to what we talked here a few moments earlier. So the principle of separating the energetical and other resources. So even military services, if you from Moldova, you will never make the military service in Moldova. You will be thrown somewhere to the north part of the Soviet Union. Those from the north part will come here. And this divided at impera, this very, very old and wise proverb, was applied on here also. So actually all our energetical resources were installed and planted over the river. And Moldova is somehow placed between, let's say, these natural borders, Dnistru River, where is with the border with the Transnistria, and Prut River is bordering the Romania. So none of energetical industries or energetical plants were installed here on the territory of Moldova. So here in Moldova, we had only wine grapes, and that's it. And all the energetical and all the industrial, the concrete fabrics, the different other metallurgical factories, so they all were in Transnistria. And surprisingly, when we started to gain the independence, the official, on paper, in 1991, this territory automatically was somehow under the focus. And it, due to the fact that there is a river, between, started different discussions that historically, when Homo sapiens appeared, from there the humanity started, and nothing was over that river, and so this is why I'm telling that we are facing hybrid warfare over 30 years, because the first hybrid warfare started in 1991, and just to understand how the war in Moldova in 1992 started. There at the border, so was patrolling some police, and some fake. So it was fake information that some police officers from that region, Transnistrian region, came and killed a few officers from Cojuhari's Moldovan region. But anyway, it was in connection anyway with this country. But it was somehow a regional conflict, and for them was also told some stories, some shootings, but just in the air, and their conflict started between people, between public servants, let's say, because the war. Where this hybrid information managed, on this Chisinau, Varnitsa, and this territory, there was actually the let's say the military action, the war. On the north part, none of the people, so citizens, so they were not interested in this. It's obviously the idea was just to create some fake platform. Informational fake platform that, in consequence, will endure the physical contact. So at that time, the general objective was not to overthrow some government or to reunite Moldova and give it back to get it back in Soviet Union. The idea was to create a violent clash in order to allow Russian troops to come in a region. So it was a mechanism that we were informing Ukraine from 1992. So what we've seen at Crimea in 2014. So nothing new. It was the idea that it was created a hybrid information that some police killed another police, so we need to embrace, to come, to start shootings. A mayor write a letter from there and says, okay, we have 60 or 50% that have Russian Federation passport, So normally it's Russian Federation citizens. We need protection because Moldova with 2 guns want to come and to kill everybody here. And based on this letter, there was a Soviet Union agreement that all post-Soviet countries, they will help each other, but it was respected only in that situation. And so they passed via Ukraine in Transnistria and assembled these big military troops. And by the way, in that region at that time, they moved when German Federation reunites, so came back to their territory. All that ammo from that part of the Europe, Russian Federation deployed in this Transnistria region with their militaries. Of course, some big quantities were they're delivered back via train, but some of them, of course, are still there. And yes, somehow, of course, it's quite difficult to say why I did such a long introduction in order to say yes or no. Because in hybrid, it's impossible to say no. Yes, it is instrumentalized, it is used, Transnistrian, as part of the hybrid warfare, but it is not the only one. So in this hybrid warfare, we've seen even different, the most stupid things that can get to the public. For instance, we had, even in 2023 or 2022, we had a deep fake already. We have here even examples of deep fake when we had a NATO meeting. So what they done? They did this big it was a meeting of NATO, and it was like a photo with all the leaders, and in center it was a big statue, and what was done that from this statue it was simulated that it was a voice, like from another a Mason or a human being, I don't know what type of a non-human being voice that was talking to the leaders of the NATO and giving them orders. Something like, you should kill everyone on this planet, with especially all the Russians. You should kill everyone who is not in the NATO. You should destroy them. And it was, at the top of realistic made, this deep fake, and shared. And in Russian there was a translation, and they said that, look how the meetings on NATO are holding. And actually, how funny it would not be now, but people were, oh, really? They are crazy, They are crazy. And there was also a lot of the work done that if you will start to be a part of the European Union, you will be on the must, like a rule, to have a homosexual in your family. Because Europe believes only in homosexuals, and that's it. So you should be ready to give your children to change their gender. It's because in EU it's not accepted, like the girl to be girl. So girl is a boy, boy should be a girl. So they change genders to children, And it's crazy. It's a stupid thing, but it gains some of public opinions. Some we also start to use this term idiot util, useful idiot, useful idiot. So when some low quality information ranks a big amount of people, we are calling, because those people, they are not willingly making these bad decisions, but we are mentioning that they are useful idiots because they are used in order to promote some stupid things, and you're put it in situation to explain that stop, nobody's changing no one's gender, it's all right. And you don't have any scientific and any logic arguments why everyone on this planet should do this. So no, but people, yes, they are somehow influenced. Yes. So on the question, obviously yes, but not to forget that in this warfare, every method is good.
I think that really speaks to the power of the misinformation, especially in an uninformed public, how that can really be difficult to defend against. I noticed that Jeff just signed on and wanted to give him an opportunity. I think we're coming to the end of our time in another 10, 15 minutes. So if we could go to Jeff, get a Russian perspective, and we'll kind of end with a final question and then pass to Olga for closing, I think, in the last few minutes we have. So Jeff, kind of over to you to talk through like the historical drivers of Russia's behavior in Moldova, what interference in Moldova kind of reveals about Russian irregular warfare, and then how you think Moldova could blunt or deter some of those Russian activities so that the rest of us can learn from it in the future. It's great to have you, man. Thanks. Over to you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks. And thanks for the invite. So just to give a little bit of background, I suppose, the territory that now makes up Moldova has been on and off part of the Russian Empire since the early 19th century, since the Napoleonic Wars, and has been an object of struggle throughout much of that history. For a lot of the Russian elite, Moldova, along with the rest of the former Soviet Union, comprises a kind of strategic space, or what former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev called the zone of privileged interests for the Russian Federation, even after the Soviet collapse. It's part of this notion of a Russian world. For the Russian Orthodox Church, Moldova comprises part of what it considers to be its canonical territory. And because of the church's role in sort of defining the outer limits of the Russian world, I think that is important. The Moldovan identity, the idea of a Moldovan language, a lot of this too is sort of bound up with the history of Russian influence. With the outbreak of pro-Western unrest, sometimes called color revolutions, in a number of countries around Russia's borders. Since the early 2000s, Moscow's moved to a very direct path of trying to oppose the spread of Western influence, Western values, and institutional linkages between these states and Western institutions like the EU and NATO. Obviously, the focus in the last several years has been in Ukraine, but this is a policy that plays out in similar ways in other parts of the former Soviet Union. And I think that we can sort of think about Moldova together with Belarus and Ukraine as sort of comprising one front of this Russian attempt at sort of consolidating its own influence and rolling back Western influence. Belarus has been pretty solidly brought under Russian influence. It's an open question how much actual sovereignty Belarus has now. Ukraine, of course, is in the midst of a brutal war of reconquest as Russia seeks to dismantle the idea of Ukrainian statehood and bring it back into the Russian Federation in some way. And so that really leaves Moldova on this kind of Western flank. And I think that the long-term Russian vision for Moldova is very similar to the vision that exists for Belarus and for Ukraine. In 2021, there was an alleged Russian roadmap for destabilization in Moldova that was published, and it talked about by 2030 basically bringing Moldova back directly under Russian control. There was a similar roadmap for Belarus that was published around the same time, and of course we've seen what's happened in Belarus. So far, Moldova has done a reasonably good job of resisting this kind of Russian onslaught. But there are a lot of vulnerabilities. And with elections coming up next year, I think that's the big inflection point. Most of the population remains pro-European, continues to support integration with the European Union. But as we've seen in the recent local elections, the results are somewhat mixed. And there is still significant Russian influence within the country. I want to focus on four real core areas of Russian influence, and then talk a little bit about how Russia seeks to use them as part of this campaign to consolidate its influence in Moldova and limit its ability to democratize and seek deeper integration with the European Union. First is Transnistria, the breakaway region that was created as part of a broader Soviet-era strategy of territorializing ethnicity. So, with the creation of the 15 Union republics that came to comprise the Soviet Union, many, if not most of them, had ethnic sub-autonomies within them, where there were groups that looked to Moscow for protection. So you think about the accessions in Georgia, or you think about Karakalpaks in Uzbekistan, or others. And there's a similar development in Moldova with the largely Slavic region east of the Dniester River. And so even during the Soviet period, the existence of these ethnic enclaves helped ensure that the local power structures in the 15 or the 14 Union republics other than Russia weren't able to completely consolidate as points of opposition against Moscow's rule. With the outbreak of conflict in Transnistria around the time of the Soviet collapse, the presence of Russian forces was instrumental in ensuring that Transnistria remained outside the political and security remit of the government in Chisinau. Today, there are still around 1,500 Russian troops there. These include regular troops as well as peacekeepers, whose presence is governed by the ceasefire that was signed at the end of the separatist conflict. And Russia argues that gives them standing under international law, and that Moldova doesn't have the right to demand their departure. Their presence continues to hang like a sword of Damocles, in the sense that they could be used to carry out different kinds of destabilizing or other military operations. And certainly in the early stages of the war in Ukraine, one of Russia's objectives was creating this land bridge across southern Ukraine that would connect Transnistria directly to Russian-controlled territory. So Ukraine's successful defense of Odessa in the early part of the conflict was really important in that sense. Nevertheless, you still have the Russian troops present in Transnistria. I think that the government in Moldova in Chisinau has actually been pretty smart in terms of how it sought to deal with the Transnistrian problem. It has not tried to use forceful responses, but has attempted to integrate the region more tightly through energy, especially after gas cutoffs from Russia last year, and also through the DCFTA that Chisinau signed with the European Union a couple of years ago, which includes Transnistria. So now the economic benefits of that FTA with the European Union can benefit Transnistria as well, and can sort of economically tie the fates of both banks of the Dnieper River together. But nevertheless, you still have significant Russian influence in Transnistria. You still have Russian forces present there, which prevent the full reintegration of Moldova's territorial integrity. Beyond that, the second thing I wanted to emphasize is Russian political interference. We've seen this Russian destabilization playbook in action in a number of other places. We're certainly seeing it in Moldova. This is a tactic that has a long history in terms of Russian political warfare. Russia has relied on various oligarchic conduits for funding that then gets channeled into groups that are designed to destabilize political life in Moldova, and to support political parties that call for closer ties with Russia. You had a while ago Vladimir Plahotniuk, more recently there was Igor Dodon, and now the big bogeyman in this scheme is Ilan Shor, who is now in exile because of the charges he faces, but still remains an important actor and an important conduit for Russian influence in Moldova. And indeed, one of the things that he's angling for is if a pro-Russian party comes to power, can pardon him, he can come back to the country and can continue to play the kind of destabilizing role that he's played. The political parties that have been backed by these oligarchs, as is the case in a number of places where Russia uses this toolkit, are vehicles for corruption, which make it harder for countries to implement rule of law, to carry out political reform, and to move closer to the criteria that are necessary for integration with the European Union. The fact that these figures have been more or less systematically excluded from the political space in Moldova has been quite important, I would argue, and has been one of the things that's facilitated the progress that Moldova has made under its current government towards meeting the criteria for EU membership. At the same time, there's a catch-22 here, which is because of the need to adhere to European standards on freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of organization, and the like. Chisinau can't necessarily go after some of these malign actors as comprehensively as would perhaps in other circumstances be ideal. So there's a constraint in that sense, but it also is about trying to create the traditions, create the practice of acting in ways that are in line with European standards. Of course, this political interference, this support for disruptive political actors also overlaps with ethnic and regional grievances. And we see this particularly in Gagauzia, where the candidate who won the regional election a couple of months ago was backed by the Shor Party. And the campaign emphasized a lot of the sort of ethnic themes and grievances, the idea that the Gagauz were not being fully represented in the existing political framework of Moldova. So even leaving aside Transnistria, which is outside the framework of the operating political system in Moldova, we still see the effects of this territorialization of ethnicity and the attempts to appeal to ethnic minorities as pro-Russian actors, which again we've seen in a number of post-Soviet countries as well. We just had local elections in Moldova a little over a week ago. The OSCE noted that there was a quote, influx of illicit and foreign funds and the monetary incentives used to influence voters' choice that undermined, end quote, that undermined the true freedom of the election. Chisinau said there's about $5 million that was funneled into the country to criminal groups that was used to support some of these political parties and various malign political actors. These groups are also fundamental in attempts at destabilization, which is the third thing I want to talk about. And this is, again, if you look at the roadmap that was released back in 2021 about Russia's strategy for reestablishing control over Moldova, this is really kind of front and center. So a lot of this money that gets channeled into the country through illicit channels is then distributed to groups to hand out for participation in demonstrations as part of a strategy of promoting political polarization, destabilization, and ultimately bringing about regime change, bringing about chaos that can then be used as an excuse for pro-Russian actors to seize power. This approach was behind the claims earlier this year that President Sandu made that Russia was behind efforts to organize a coup in Moldova by stirring protests and destabilization, led to the expulsion of a significant number of Russian quote-unquote diplomats who were accused of being responsible for some of these activities. But it's not just the promotion of demonstrations and cultivation of destabilizing actors. There's also an economic component to this. Russia takes advantage of its continued economic influence in Moldova to put pressure on the country and to create further social tensions. So I talked before about the gas cutoffs after the start of the war in Ukraine, which actually led Moldova to deepen its economic relationship with the EU as a way of trying to compensate for the loss of Russian gas. There was later a Russian ban on Moldovan agricultural imports. Notably, Transnistria was excluded from the ban, as was another region where pro-Russian figures were in charge at the local level. So it's very clear that these kind of activities are not driven by sanitary or phytosanitary concerns. They're not driven by trade concerns. It's really a part of a political campaign, this political warfare attempt to try and promote social tensions, create economic pressures as part of a larger strategy of destabilization, seeking to create the foundations for some of these pro-Russian actors to take advantage of the chaos and seize power. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about was information and information operations, because again, this is a very important component of Russian political warfare, not just in Moldova, but in a number of other countries as well. You have significant numbers of Russian speakers in Moldova, certainly in Gagauzia and Transnistria, but even in the rest of the country as well. Russian websites, television channels, newspapers are important conduits of information. Much of this, many of these channels are used to promote direct misinformation. The previous speaker talked about the deepfake of the use of deepfakes. There was one that spread of President Sandu calling for mobilization against Russia. Part of a broader narrative that these outlets promote, that Sandu's government, the PAS, is in some way illegitimate, that it's promoting this kind of decadent Western lifestyle, that it's contrary to the traditional values that Moldovans as Orthodox people aligned with the Russian world are supposed to support. The Russian-speaking population is the main target for this. I think this is a vulnerability that Russia has sort of all around the former Soviet region, that it really, most of this disinformation is in Russian, and it doesn't do a good job of promoting this kind of content in non-Russian languages. There aren't a lot of Russian operatives or journalists who speak Romanian, who speak Ukrainian, who speak Kazakh. But because there are still enough people in these countries who speak and understand Russian, this kind of information has some purchase. And then we know all about the techniques for amplifying it online using bots and other kinds of things, which again, we see here as we do in other countries. There's been a real struggle in Moldova over the ability of these Russian outlets to operate. Recently, there was a ban on Russian websites and television channels. Other Russian newspapers had been suspended earlier. The accusation is that the funding for them is coming from organized criminal groups. So again, this conflation between Russian state interests and organized crime, which we also saw in the support for malign political actors, is very much present here in the information space as well. And again, for Chisinau, there's a challenge here because in going after these malign actors and challenging malign Russian influence, there's still the imperative pressed by Brussels to abide by European standards of freedom of the press and freedom of speech and the like. So threading that needle is going to be one of the real challenges that Moldova faces. I know you asked for a couple of recommendations for what Moldova can do. I think it's doing a lot of what is possible. And that includes being proactive about going after some of these malign actors, whether we're talking about media outlets or political parties that are acting outside the framework of party finance laws. I think Moldova is doing a pretty good job of trying to ensure that the benefits of the deeper ties to Europe benefit traditionally marginalized communities and regions. But I think that's going to be one of the key challenges going forward, especially given Russia's emphasis on stirring regional and ethnic tensions in places like Gagauzia and, of course, Transnistria. So making sure that the populations of these regions feel that they too have a stake in the reform process, in democratization, and in the deepening of ties between Moldova and the European Union. I think that obviously the state of the economy is going to be really important ahead of the elections in 2025. And then, of course, what happens in Ukraine. At the end of the day, I think that is in a lot of ways fundamental to the political stability of Moldova. Because again, if Russia does have success in Ukraine beyond what it's had so far, especially if it's able to expand its influence further to the west, that increases pretty dramatically its ability to project power directly against Moldova. And even though Moldova continues to promote neutrality, I think it's going to have discussions, not necessarily with NATO, but with individual European states about how it can be given security protection, especially if we think about what is going to happen if there's a ceasefire in Ukraine, if there's some kind of unsatisfactory resolution to the conflict there, because the Russian threat's not going to go away. And I know that people in Chisinau, like people in Tbilisi and elsewhere, are really worried that at the end of the war in Ukraine, whenever that is and whatever that looks like, they're going to be very much on the front lines of whatever comes next. They're smaller, they're vulnerable, and it's going to be more difficult for the US and NATO to help them defend themselves kinetically if the necessity arises. So I think having some of those conversations now would go a long way in ensuring that Moldova has what it needs to deter that kind of direct Russian intervention that I think is unfortunately a very real possibility once we get towards the end of the active conflict in Ukraine. Thanks.
No, thanks, Jeff. Very insightful, and appreciate you hitting the themes of Transnistria, the Russian political influence, the fundamental destabilization of Moldova, and information operations. I think all themes that are extremely important to consider. We're coming to the last 7 minutes of our time, and I want to just hit one question for everybody before we wrap up with Olga, and that is, I'm a pathological optimist. So, and you said it yourself that Moldova is doing pretty much everything it can and pretty decently defending against these hybrid threats, despite the way that they metastasize and they constantly change using new technology and new techniques at the tactical level. But assuming that there is some successful defense of these Russian hybrid warfare tactics in Moldova, how will that change Russia's behavior? And you can put aside everything like Ukraine dominating. If Ukraine did turn out in Russia's favor, absolutely have a power projection platform and continue to intimidate their march west. But assuming that there is some successful defense, how is that going to change Russia's behavior? Over to you, Jeff, first, and we'll go back to Vlad and Wili.
I think there's obviously the tactical and the strategic, and I think at the strategic level, it's probably not going to change as long as Russia is the Russia that we have right now, which is to say a Russia that's enthralled to this kind of post-imperial syndrome, where it's trying to reestablish a sphere of influence through various kinds of malign techniques. I don't think that's going to change. That ultimately requires change in Russia itself, and I think we have very little leverage to compel that kind of change. I think where you could see something different is at the tactical level. It's kind of like the game of whack-a-mole, where if you're successful at tamping down, one attempt at doing this, Moscow will figure out other ways. And I was talking about this with the political parties. Plahotniuc was sort of neutralized, and then we saw Dodon, and then he was arrested, and now it's Shore. So it's not that Russia is deeply invested in any one of these people or the parties that they create around themselves. It's just that it's searching for different vehicles for this kind of activity, depending on who's available at any given moment. Over.
I would say the most scariest dream or the most scariest scenario for Russian Federation would be if corruption will disappear. So their base, they're the biggest bomb, let's say the heaviest ammo is touching this corruption and also combining criminal assets. So I would say further would be to redress or to include criminal organization in gaining quite aggressive the power, political power, social power by the post-Soviet romantism, organized crime groups, criminal, because it's part of this Soviet Union. Because even this term of thief-in-law was made by by Stalin, by the leader of the Soviet Union, in order to control the masses, in order to have sometimes very fast and sharp replies. So strategy would be to involve these criminal elements. One, it is easy to control them, because when you don't like it, you just shutting down. And we can have a look on private military groups that are till now forbidden by Russian Federation, but they are. And we saw how it might end, and it will end, obviously, at one moment. Yes, I totally agree with Jeffrey regarding the tactical. Yes, obviously, the changes will be in this field. Now, anyway, the major objective is to overthrow the governmental entities. The major objective is to create chaos, because in chaos you can provide any criminal element to any level. Let's take a look, just the last example, the COVID-19. COVID-19, which actually was just a little more, and it could destroy the economies of different countries, continents. So people were shocked down. And organized crime group, they raised their welfare hundreds of percents, thousands of percents. The drug dealing raised at an incredible amounts of money. So the conclusion is that any chaos is a catalyst, is an enhancement for the organized crime group. So this is why, in our opinion, the general objective is to create chaos. When you create chaos, you put your order. I mean, an example of order. And you are using it, like those dolls, in theater, those finger entities. And in case if something will go wrong, it's not an issue. You can shut him down to jail, or even maybe an incident with airplane, something like this.
Oh, thanks, Vlad. Willie, your predictions for the future before we pass to Olga for closeout.
Yeah, I will just sum it up in 1 minute, because I will build up on Jeff's point of view on strategy. What is important, so everybody else should know, is that the presidential administration, they have issued a draft of national security strategy. So Moldova has now a draft of a security strategy, which you can consult over the website of the presidential administration. And over there, you will see the focus and what's next to come in terms of strategy for Moldova. And over there, you'll also see two things. One is the approach that Moldova wants to take, and that divides also into things which is integrated, and it's also predictive. So they would like to break up silos and to work jointly, and predictive in terms of having scenarios so that you would have time acting as a resource because you have pre-planned different working scenarios. And another pillar is communication. So there is a strong focus on the strategy that communication becomes a tool. So how you fill up the informational space, so you move from the negative, or you give alternatives to citizens by presenting facts and presenting statistics. And this also helps because in the European path that Moldova has chosen to take, a lot of these statistics are about welfare, and they should be anyway collected. So it's only a matter of making them visible to the public. So there will be a choice, and it will contribute to developing critical thinking for the public. So that's my statement. I hope I did it in 1 minute.
Wonderful. I will keep it short for closing. First of all, I would love to thank our guests, our speakers, Vladislav Cojuhari, Deputy General Secretary of the Ministry of Interior of Republic of Moldova, Victor Wili Apreutesei, the European Union High-Level Advisor on Security, Internal Affairs, and of course, Dr. Jeff Mankoff, Distinguished Research Fellow at the United States National Defense University. Thank you to Michael for co-moderating with me. And I will close out by emphasizing what Wili just said, strategy and communication, aka strategic communication, which I hope that platforms such as this one will spend more time educating on. Last reminder, please join us in this conversation, contribute content to both our mother organization, IWI, as well as our fellow projects. Reminder, IWI Project Europe, as well as follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. Thank you very much. We will see you for our next panel, which will be in a few weeks. Thank you so much. Have a great evening or a great day, depending where you're at. Bye. Mulțumesc.
Bye-bye. Thank you.